Hey everyone, this is Jen and you're watching BPD Woman. On this channel, you will learn how to more effectively live with your borderline personality disorder. Whether you are living with BPD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or whether you are just a highly sensitive person or find that you have difficulty managing your emotions, you are in the right place. My aim is to share my experience living with the disorder for the last 30 to 40 years and being diagnosed officially for the last 20 years in connection with offering positive, solution-based approaches to recovery using skills such as DBT. I am not a life coach or a therapist or a counselor. However, I can answer one question that most of those folks cannot, which is, what is it like to live with borderline personality disorder? And while having a degree and seeking out a doctor and someone who's qualified in DBT is absolutely essential, and I would not be where I am today without those techniques and connections, they cannot fully understand and know some of the insights that I can share with you on this channel. And so I hope you'll join us here. If you are a family member or a friend or a coworker, just anyone else who is interested in learning more about BPD from a positive solution-based perspective, you are also welcome, and there is a video section playlist just for you. So if that all sounds good, please hit subscribe and the bell below so you never miss a beat. I produce anywhere from 3 to 5 videos each week. So let's get into today's topic. So today's topic comes from longtime follower and awesome contributor Kim Poster, and she has a channel, so check out her BPD channel. But her suggestion to me was that she had a few things going on. So she emailed me a couple of suggestions, and so I'm going to kind of unpack them and we can talk about them. Primarily, she wanted to know how to be able to manage interpersonal effectiveness conversations in the moment without finding that she was beginning to split or beginning to think of this person in a negative light, while also asking for what she needed. And so essentially, if I kind of break down, and Kim, if I'm wrong, please leave me a comment below, but if I'm breaking down what she's essentially asking for is that how she can have a conversation with someone, respect their opinions and views, respect her own opinions and views, and come off very both respectful to herself and to the other person. And if needed to ask for something, ask for something. So that's a lot of different things, and we're going to be talking about how to kind of juggle many different skills and many different components at once. And the one thing that I want to share with you is that if you're starting out with these skills, or even if you've had DBT for 2 years, which is still relatively a short period of time in the scheme of your life, you may not be able to manage all of these skills at once. And in fact, what I would say or recommend is focus on 1 or 2 that you can do and get those up to speed, with a great deal of success before adding in other skills. And I don't mean this is a crude comparison, but I work with a dog trainer, and he basically says that your dog has mastered a command if they can execute it 80% of the time when asked. So that means that 8 out of 10 times they're sitting when you've asked them to sit. They're going to their crate when you've gone to their crate. That's a crude comparison, but essentially you can't build on those other skills while you're training your dog if they haven't mastered those first skills, right? So you certainly can't learn to walk your dog off leash if you haven't mastered the art of come or leave it, or they don't respond to their name, right? So just keep that. So one thing that Kim says in her email is that she really wants to work on opposite action skills and also the ability to not split on people in her conversations. And she gave me a few examples, one being a personal, like family relationship conversation, and that how when she felt they were tending to other people's needs or other family members' needs, which is obviously what you want them to do, right? She would feel a sense of betrayal, not say something, not stand up for herself, or not quite, ask a question about what was going on. And then she would leave the relationship. Then the second example that she gave was that when dealing with her boss at work, and that, this boss would say something pretty bluntly, right? And so you're right, you will have to learn to come up against, using these skills with people who will make it a bit harder for you to execute these skills, which is difficult, especially when you haven't built up the confidence and the self-esteem to be like, I do have a right to ask for this. This is okay that I ask for this. My dog's here. And my cat. The other cat I don't know where she is. So in those situations, you're going to handle them differently, right? Because your expectations, your relationship levels, and what you want to gain out of each of those relationships is going to be different. And so you'll want to You'll want to keep this in mind when you are executing these skills. So for instance, what you likely want out of a job, keeping a job, getting a promotion, staying employed, having financial reliability, is different than what you want from a family member, right? To be respected, to be recognized, to be a part of a group, things like that. Or they may be different. So we're going to talk a little bit about these different aspects. And in her example with the boss said something to the effect of, "That's a really stupid idea. Why would we do that?" Okay. Which is, wow, right? Like, that's a really harsh way to shut somebody down. And also, in my personal opinion and experience in the workplace, a great way to make sure that your employees never voice their ideas, and it doesn't really, build for a conducive working relationship, does it? All right. So let's talk about some tips that you can use so that you can better manage and navigate while using your skills and ultimately feeling good about yourself and what you're asking for. The first thing that I'd recommend is to cope ahead. And I cannot say this enough. You can create cope aheads in your iPhone, write out little notes to yourself of things, events, phrases, people, situations, smells, things that remind you of certain things that are triggering for you. And you don't necessarily have to understand why the trigger is triggering, just understand that it's triggering. So for me, a big trigger is when I hear this following phrase: "I'm sorry that you feel that way." Well, no, they don't, do they? What they're basically saying is sorry, not sorry. They're doing a twofer there. Not only are they negating and taking away what I feel, but they're also absolving themselves of any kind of emotional responsibility for the junky thing that they just did. So knowing what your triggers are is helpful when you're navigating your different relationships, because when people use certain phrases or situations, right, they may not necessarily mean it in the way that it was intended, although that's can be clarified in a different tip. So tip number one is just knowing what your triggers are, writing them out. And I've created a video called Cope Ahead. So check out that video. And it's really, I think, useful. And if you don't know what your triggers are, then you clearly can't execute your skills. So knowing what your triggers are is tip number one. Tip number two, using clarifying questions, statements, while keeping it in a gray zone area in your mind. So let's go back to Kim's example when, her boss said something to the effect of, well, that's a really dumb idea, or that's going to be too much of a headache, something like that. Now, presumably Kim is feeling put down, like she's not valuable, like her ideas are silly, not feeling inclusive. It's probably going to lead her in turn not to speak up more. And all of those things combined can be pretty dangerous, because then you're shutting down, then you're not contributing, and you're like, well, if I'm not appreciated, why should I even try at work, which can lead to bigger problems. So in this instance, in your mind, when appropriate, okay, using the opposite action skill or these other skills is only when appropriate, mostly speaking, is that using agree-minded statements such as, in your mind, he disagrees or she disagrees with my idea, but I think my idea is really great for the following reasons, right? So the first thing that you want to do with step two, which is, and we're calling step two clarifying and gray zoning, is to say to yourself, okay, They don't like this idea. They don't think this way, but I do, and that's perfectly fine, right? A second way to build on this is and a way to kind of open up your viewpoint is to ask clarifying questions. So in this instance with her boss, and again, only when this is appropriate, Kim might say something like, well, why do you think that this would be too much of a headache, right? And be prepared for the answer, but also be prepared to defend your idea, right? Sometimes we just have to do this. Some people are very difficult, or they'll push back, or they want to shut people down. And so you'll have to be prepared to be your own advocate. So in this instance, let's say if this boss said something like, well, that's going to cost a lot of time and money. That's a really dumb idea. Kim not only could stick up for herself, but also potentially look like a hero in the workplace by doing the following. I understand that traditionally you may think that this is taking a lot of time. However, I've crunched some numbers and I really think that we could save 25% of our money and 30% less time working on it if we do this way. I've created a couple of points. Would you be willing to look at them? Boom, right? You've just shared how they could save money, how they could save manpower hours, how they can be more effective at work. And you're also sticking up for yourself, right? So that inside you feel elevated and good about yourself. Now be prepared. They may be something like, no, I don't want to hear that. And you can be like, at that point, right, it's time to back off. Okay, they're not open and willing. I got to move on. That's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is sort of a component of tip number 2, which is to ask clarifying questions, right? So why do you think it's a dumb idea? Or why did you do it that way, And just keep in mind that you're not using this as in an accusatory tone or as if you're asking when you already have the answer in your mind. Like I've done this tons of times, like, so where were you last night? Okay, that's not a clarifying question. That's a gotcha question. And believe me, I've done plenty of gotcha questions. But my friend, she's a vegetarian, and so she doesn't like to give her dogs meat or like certain kinds of treats. And, I will say, well, why don't you like giving them this kind of treat, And it could be that she just doesn't like the smell of meat, or it could be the pet has an allergy to that food product, right? But so asking clarifying questions prevents you from jumping to conclusions, which, I've definitely done tons of times. So that's tip number 3. Tip number 4 is another great skill that I love, and that's check the facts. So you want to check the facts of the situation. When that unmanageable emotion pops up for you, you may start to believe or think, and it may feel very real. They don't like me. They think I'm stupid. I'm worthless. I'm going to get fired. They're going to break up with me. I'm going to break up with them. In those moments, you'll want to slow yourself down and check the facts, which is also another way to ask clarifying questions, except checking the facts is sort of like a more internal procedure, where clarifying questions is an external. You're doing that one-on-one. Checking the facts is best done when you're in an emotionally regulated state, not in a heightened emotional state. So asking check the facts statements, like, do they think I'm silly? Looking at the whole picture, right? Like, I feel like my boyfriend only spends time with his family. And then, you go back, right? Maybe you think of the last week. Okay, well, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, he spent with me all day. Thursday, Friday, he spent with his family. Okay, well, actually, when I look at it, he's actually spending more time with me, right? These are simple ways that you can sort of kind of check yourself. And the reason why you're checking the facts for yourself is so that you don't spin off into these emotional roller coasters, which I've definitely taken the ride on many, many, many times in my life. So that's another tip to help you kind of stay regulated in those interpersonal moments. A fifth skill that is helpful is to tell yourself, it's okay that they disagree, or it's okay that I have this opinion, right? And in this tip, you can also introduce some gray thinking instead of that black and white thinking. So for instance, my friend is a vegetarian. I'm not. I think vegetarian and veganism can go overboard. Actually, I have been a vegetarian, right? she thinks that Will Ferrell movies are annoying. I absolutely love Will Ferrell, and if I'm in a down mood, then I love watching them. Now, in the past, had I heard these types of statements, like, I don't like Will Ferrell movies, or I'm a vegetarian, and, you know, I might think something like, well, she's basically telling me by disagreeing with me that my opinions are stupid and I'm worthless and, well, I can't be around her. I don't do that as much anymore, right? I may start to feel like that maybe for a few minutes, and then I pull myself back by using these questions in this gray thinking, or a statement actually I make to myself. And so tip number 5 is that it's okay with people to disagree with you. And what I will say is, she is my friend. She's a vegetarian. She doesn't like Will Ferrell movies. I do like meat. There's nothing wrong with that. I love Will Ferrell movies. He brings me a lot of joy. And we can still be friends, even though we don't agree on every point. That's totally fine. The fact that she's a vegetarian and doesn't like Will Ferrell movies is not a deal breaker for our relationship, right? Like, know what your deal breakers are, but for me, like, a deal breaker would be like, she was insulting to me, or she belittled my opinions, right? Or she didn't accept my opinions, you know, she just dismissed them. Those are like things to look for, but it's okay that people have opposing views, right? And that you have opposing views. It's definitely not okay if someone abuses or belittles those views. So in summation here, Kim is trying to do a lot of things that I think we can all relate to. She's trying to stay emotionally regulated. She's trying not to split. She's trying to be able to have enough emotional energy that she can focus on what the other person is saying. She's trying to have a productive conversation. She's trying to stay regulated at work so that she can finish her work and keep a good position, right? Or good standing at work. That's a lot of things at play, no doubt. That's a lot, even for a person who doesn't have an emotionally dysregulated situation going on, or if they're not highly sensitive. So again, my going back to this, you know, think of 1 or 2 skills that you want to work on. Get to those at 80% capacity before you start adding in those other skills. Remember, you know, your dog can't walk off leash if they don't know how to respond to come in their name first. So if they're not listening to you, they're certainly not going to listen to you when they're 20 feet away from you. Okay. The third thing is to remember at most is that you want to validate yourself even before you validate someone else. You can't validate someone else if you haven't learned how to validate yourself. That also takes time. And so in these interpersonal processes or these day-to-day things, what I would recommend that you look for are ways that you can remain confident, build your self-esteem, work on your skills, do things that are helpful and not hurtful, and making sure that you're, you know, working on ethics and not, you know, losing your temper if that's going to be something that's going to make you feel bad about yourself. It does to me, right? So again, these are a lot of different things, but I hope that these 5 tips on how to kind of achieve a more effective conversation and balance between you and the other person has been helpful. My name's Jen. You've been watching BPD Woman. Please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting below. As always, thanks for tuning in. And until I speak with you next time, please be effective. Bye-bye.